Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast signing day or post signing day edition of the show. Erik Skopil, Jackson Moore on the show. I'm Matt Prehm, breaking down Oregon's number 2 for now ranked recruiting class in the country. It's the highest it's ever been in terms of top 25 ranking. It's not the highest score, though, that this program has ever had. It's third best, only bested by last year's class and the 2024 recruiting class. But nonetheless, that could also change, I think, if some stuff happens, which we're going to dive into. Dan Lanning had his press conference Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. He discussed most of the recruiting class, and that's where we're going to start here, guys. We'll go to Jackson first. This class is pretty much done. It's not done yet, though. There are some things trickling in as of us recording this podcast. 2 of them just happened. And there's also a couple big names still out there. Jackson, what's the latest with this class and where it stands?
Yeah, it's you're monitoring all the signings, making sure they all come in, and then it just felt like everything stopped once the Chris Henry Jr. situation started to play out, and that's jumped to the forefront. And big kudos to Tom Loy and Blair Angelo, 24/7 Sports, for being on top of this. And it was a development in the days leading up to signing day where it felt like Oregon had generated smoke, but probably just quite not enough to make a difference. And then the whole Brian Hartline situation at Ohio State, it seems like it just totally reopened the whole deal for Chris Henry. And now it almost feels like, based off of what we're reporting this morning, that it would be a minor upset if he didn't sign with Oregon. The Ducks are kind of viewed as the slight favorite here. Ohio State's trying to get back into good graces, and there's been some USC and Texas rumblings, but there's a slight lean to Oregon. And I mean, that would be massive, obviously, for the Ducks to get that giant cherry on top here to finish off the class and jump up to number 1. It's not a lock by any means right now, but what a difference 24 hours can make.
And gosh, did that whole thing make for good. I was going to say TV. I think it counts as TV, streaming TV with the 24/7 Sports signing show where Tom Loy is on the phone off camera and then comes back in. Breaking! I've got the update. I just talked to Chris Henry. This sounds like he's not going to sign now. He wasn't aware of Brian Hartline's situation when he initially at the Mater Dei high school ceremony said he was going to stick with the Buckeyes. And then it was maybe it's Oregon and USC primarily, and as you said, USC's kind of fallen out. But an absolute, you get these moments, and it seems like they're happening more and more. I think Matt and I can attest to this, having done a lot of these Oregon signing days, where there seems like there's just a moment every year now where you're just kind of glued to the edge of your seats, and Oregon is in on or a part of some kind of big time moment. And this definitely felt like a moment, even though it hasn't been completed yet, where it's going to be memorable. And that's what I think that's how people are going to look at this signing class, this signing day is. Do you remember when Chris Henry, everybody thought he was going to Ohio State? He put the Buckeye hat on. It was all Ohio State. And then breaking news took place and everybody was kind of like, at a loss, running around with their heads cut off for a couple of hours, unsure what was going to happen. And again, nothing final here, but certainly what Tom Loy has reported this morning, he has an update over on DuckTerritory, indicates Oregon might be in a really good spot. And wouldn't be surprising, I think, to any of us if shortly after this time this podcast goes up, things have changed. He's part of this class, and Oregon has their first number 1 class in school history.
Yeah, I think you look at it's happening more and more with Oregon, the signing day, like juice or the excitement or the flip or whatever. I think what's really interesting to watch and why it's maybe become such a memorable deal here, and maybe a program altering deal, is it's not just that, hey, they're going out and they're flipping a middle tier 4-star prospect that's
well, Matt, let me throw a name out. Remember when Taradny Prevost flipped to Oregon, and that was this huge exciting thing? But to your point, it was like a borderline top 247 guy.
Yes, and they had some fireworks yesterday in terms of 2 commitments on signing day, that 3-star guys, and those are exciting, and you're not trying to downplay them. But you look at Henry, and he's the number 1 ranked receiver in the country. He's a 5-star player. He's a program-altering player. You look at last year, Naeem Offord, he was a 5-star player. They were involved late with a couple other 5-stars potentially flipping there. You go back to 2024, and you see the success that Oregon had in that class, which at the time, it was the best recruiting class in the country. And there was the Jeremiah McClellan flip. There was Jericho Johnson, ended up signing with Oregon. You hung on with Elijah Rushing. These are top 100. These are 5-star caliber guys. And that's where it feels like it's elevated. Now, not only is Oregon having the Azel Barang commitment, the Trevor Watson commitment that they had yesterday, but they're now also becoming one of those schools that, hey, every year you need to recognize the fact that they are going to alter the landscape of the entire country's recruiting landscape with their success, with their flips. And being in a position where Brian Hartline at Ohio State leaves his position to become the USF head coach opened the door into Jackson's point. Now it sounds like Oregon's kind of the go-away favorite here to get Chris Henry, which is surprising, but at the same time, not really surprising, it feels like.
Do we want to talk about how good Chris Henry is, or was that putting the cart before the horse? Because this is a
here's a question, because I teased this to you guys here before we went on the air. Jaylen Lott, Oregon's
let's hit that too.
Quasi 5-star receiver. He has not signed his letter of intent yet and submitted it. He's at least told his dad has told 24/7 Sports Mike Roach that he is signed. They just haven't submitted the paperwork. Well, then my question becomes, what's the holdup? Why, if you've signed, why have you not sent it in? Let's first 1 second. I'm gonna pause the question. Jackson, should we be concerned? What's the player? What's the impact that this guy could bring to Oregon?
I think anytime that signature's not in, there's a reason to be concerned. All the reporting, as mentioned, is that he's not wavering. There's been some discussion about maybe there's a little bit of complication with the paperwork. They're just trying to sort something out, re-sign some things, but you can't help but wonder if the Chris Henry situation is in the back of the minds there. And we knew a couple of Ducks were going to sign on Thursday, and they've came, and we're still waiting on Lott, and we're still waiting on Henry. So there's just enough room there to speculate. I believe the reporting, and I think Lott's going to come in, and there won't be anything there. But until that moment happens, you're always a little bit worried. Lott's been he's had an amazing senior season. He's put up crazy numbers, 20-plus touchdowns. He himself would be obviously a huge addition to the team. Then you add in Chris Henry, and then, I don't mean to diminish Lott at all, but he's even higher ranked and would be an even greater deal. The two of them together, I think, could certainly coexist. So I'm not necessarily sure that it's got to be one or the other. I think if Lott's not at Oregon, he's probably at Texas, and the Longhorns got a lot of great receivers over there too. So It's going to be tough wherever he goes, but he's definitely got the talent. And I think just the thing for me is that Texas has been pushing so hard for Lott for several months, and it feels like it's almost been an irritant to him. Like there's never been anything that I've seen come from Lott throughout the process that was like, yeah, I'm thinking about Texas, or I got a tough decision to make. It's just they've been there the whole time, and they might be in the perfect spot as a safety net if Lott decides this situation isn't for him at the last second. But all signs point to him still going to Oregon.
I think he even tweeted he shut his recruitment down on, I want to say, November 25th. So it seemed like everything was headed in the right direction. And there's photos online of him flashing the O at his signing ceremony in Oregon gear, which is why, to Matt's point, it is a little confounding when seemed like there's no indications based upon what took place yesterday that he's, at least publicly, that he's not going to be at Oregon and in the class. But if that's the case, why hasn't the signature been faxed in? Why isn't the paperwork here? Why haven't they been able to announce it?
So here's your question.
Okay.
Jesus, long enough. Would you trade Jaylen Lott for Chris Henry? If you got Chris Henry, that meant you lost Jaylen Lott. Would you make that trade? I don't know if that is what's happening here, but I think you could easily kind of connect the dots and want to go conspiracy theory type stuff. That could easily be a sold conspiracy.
Well, here's one thing I will say is I don't know in the new updated 24/7 Sports rankings, these players are right next to each other. They're 32 and 33 nationally in the class, which unfortunately for Jaylen Lott, they're only 32 5-stars, so he's the guy on the cusp who didn't quite get over. Either way, you're getting an awesome receiver. I think if we're going purely based upon traits and skill sets and how they match with what the rest of Oregon has, Jaylen Lott, who is an incredibly dynamic player, I absolutely would love to have him on this Oregon roster. He's going to be a stud wherever he goes. Henry just is a little different at 6'5", right? Like that's a kind of body type. I know they have Kyler Casper, who actually I don't know if they have Kyler Casper for 2026. I don't know what he plans to do. They didn't have him the last couple of years because of injury. My point is Henry at 6'5" is and with an incredibly unusual skill set for an athlete who is that size. I think you take him over a lot. But again, you can't go wrong. And these are two guys that are right neck and neck based upon the recruiting rankings next to each other.
I kind of wonder, because it feels like right now you've got Lott as an 100% addition, and Henry may be at about a 60%. So are you willing to gamble your sure thing with Lott for
Sure.
Henry? I mean, it does sound like, Lott's, if there is any concern there, that it's going to be a reaction to what happens to Henry. So maybe it's not necessarily that, but it would sure be a shame if you fumbled Lott and then didn't get Henry at the same time, if you could have just signed Lott in the first place. But I think there's a good shot here that they're both Ducks by the end of the day, and you don't have to worry about that scenario.
I really want to see both of them fit.
Yes, that's my answer. That's the right answer.
I really want to see both of them fit because, Eric, you brought this up when we were kind of just mingling about waiting to get the show going. 5 5-star receivers next year could potentially be on Oregon's roster. And my first reaction to that was that's why Dante Moore comes back to Oregon if even with the offensive coaching change. The talent level will be as good as it's ever been on paper next year if this happens. It's probably already there, but
it is.
We're getting to a point where we've never seen this much talent before, and then we'll see what happens with the OC hire. But that's what's I think so exciting about this entire class, not just the Jaylen Lott and the Chris Henry combination we could have. And by the way, Gatlin Bear, another 5-star receiver from a couple years ago, is now officially on board, re-signed with Oregon. So theoretically, Oregon could be bringing in 3 5-star receivers in this class. It's probably as good of what Jackson, what did Dan say about it's quantity over quality or quality over quantity this year for Oregon, and that statement could never be any more true than it is today based on the rankings and the player ranking per average.
Yeah, absolutely. They may not have quite the points right now with the USC having so many commitments, but the average per commit is wildly different, and it's really impressive, and it'll only go higher if the Ducks can pull this off. The other quote that caught my ear from Dan Lanning was that he said his commits aren't surprised by some of the developments on the staff, that they're honest and they lay everything out, and that maybe some schools don't, and the recruits feel like the rug's been pulled underneath them at the last second. And I can't help but think that was applicable to the whole Chris Henry situation. So a little bit.
I was just going to say, and I know Matt wrote a piece on it, so he can kind of break down some of what was said yesterday, but it really stands out in this class that Oregon lost both its coordinators. We think Tosh has not been official, but if that plays out the way it does, and there were certainly reports that it will play out that way, to lose both your coordinators within 48 hours of signing day and not have a single decommitment is just incredible work. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, Matt. It's we didn't hear anybody wavering in the fact that nobody actually has, besides maybe Jaylen Lott, and it seems like that's more Chris Henry related than Oregon related. That's wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, put it that way.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like I don't know if this happens with Mario. I don't know. Certainly don't get doesn't happen with Taggart, Helfrich, Chip Kelly, Mike Bellotti. You see a position coach leave, or the two coordinators leave, the identity of the program's offense and defense.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, I don't think it is, but in theory, the negative recruiting would be really easy to do. Of, hey, like, you don't know what they're going to look like next year, and the program sees 0 decommitments. When we talked a little bit about Chris Henry just now, of that was directly related to Brian Hartline leaving at Ohio State. And to not have that happen at Oregon, I think that speaks to the strategy, the involvement of the entire staff to kind of cover for one another. We've heard it before, like multiple schools talk about it, but this is like living proof. This is living evidence that the way Oregon is doing it, not saying other programs are doing it wrong, but the way Oregon is doing it, it's working. And I thought it was really interesting that Lanning said that he sits down with every recruit and is extremely honest with him about his future, which he's made very clear he's not leaving Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a driving factor in why this is so successful. But he tells recruits, hey, you come here, our job is to make you successful, and to make you as successful as you possibly can and be, and as quickly as you can be. And that could lead to you leaving here to have an opportunity to the NFL early as an early entry guy, or as a 4th-year senior, or maybe as a 5th-year senior. But hopefully we get you to the NFL. But your success could also then impact your position coach or your coordinator to going and helping and fulfill their own dreams of maybe becoming a head coach somewhere else. And I'm not leaving, so they have to go somewhere else to be that head coach. So you're probably not going to finish your time here with the person that brought you here. And that's a big gamble to make with high-profile recruits that could easily go and pick another school because of that honesty. But I think Oregon's staff and Lanning's like being so genuine and honest and upfront, it probably lays the groundwork for when this does happen. There's probably little doubt. I mean, Jackson, you spoke with Bryson Beaver. Like, did he have any inkling of leaving when Will Stein left? I don't think he did, right?
He did not, and I think he's been very solid to Oregon either way. I don't think it was going to disrupt him. But the other thing Lanning added that caught my ear also was that the staff does a lot of team recruiting. So if you do lose your position coach, there's 3 or 4 more coaches that just as well, hopefully. And I think back to when I talked to Beaver originally when the whole Oregon deal started, and it was not just Will Stein, Dan Lanning. There was a whole crew of coaches on the whiteboard with him going over the playbook and schemes and things. So I think I don't know whether if many schools are still, just relying on one guy to handle the position recruiting as much as maybe it used to be. I'm sure more schools are doing it more than Oregon is, but it's not a situation where Beaver's only connection to the staff is Will Stein, and now Will Stein's gone and he's scrambling. No, it's kind of just one out of many different factors there. And their goal is to make that the way across the board. So even if you do lose your coordinator, you lose your position coach, you don't feel like your guy is gone and you don't fit in anymore. So I was really impressed by how they've handled that. And with the way you're allowed to run staffs now and hire so many people, it makes it a little bit easier to pull that off. But they've definitely done that successfully.
I think one thing that it's funny, I was watching the 5-star documentary series, which was on Paramount Plus. Go check it out. It's part of our parent company, I guess, worth your time. But DeCorian Moore is one of the players being featured. And DeCorian, they talked about his recruitment and briefly, and I'm sure they oversimplified it. But what they basically said is the LSU head coach, who they didn't name, but we know it's Brian Kelly, just didn't have a good relationship with DeCorian. And then that Dan Lanning did. And that was almost as simple as it. And again, I know that's an oversimplification. And by the way, LSU, tough documentary series to watch because the first episode is about Bryce Underwood and about DeCorian Moore, 2 guys who were committed to LSU. And both families are basically like, yeah, Brian Kelly did a bad job. And that's why we went to other schools. So that's like, eesh, that's not great. But I do think that that's the thing that That's why when there are turnover like this, and we see the questions coming, and I understand fans are going to be curious or worry. I mean, I know how fans worry during the games because I see them in my mentions on social media. I see them on the website. It's human nature to go, oh no, the coordinators are going a couple days before signing day. Is this thing about to like snowball? I just think that with Dan Lanning here, I don't think you need to have that worry, because there's just a belief that things are going to get done the right way and that the position hires are going to be great. But even if they were lesser than great, you'd be under a head coach in Dan Lanning, who is among the most exciting coaches, the most dynamic coaches in the country. And I think his star shines so bright on a day like this as a head coach and a recruiter, because it's not that clip with that 5-star podcast with the Korean, that really just stood out to me. Like, this is not the way it is everywhere. It's the way it should be everywhere, where you're committing and feeling confident in your head coach and that relationship. But Oregon differentiates itself a little bit because Dan is so hands-on and so involved in all these recruitments. And to your guys' broader point, so are the 3 or 4 other coaches on their side of the ball, and probably even the coaches on the other side of the ball, making these relationships and building them.
This class has, if you use the composite or the 24/7 sports rankings, the two of them combined, it currently has 5 5-star commits in it. Anthony Jones, Jet Washington, Emmanuel Nacho, Kendra Harrison, and Jaylen Lott. Between the industry average or 24/7 sports independent rankings. Anthony Jones may be, in my opinion, the most impressive get of Oregon's entire class and of all the 5 stars, until Chris Henry decides what he's going to do. Simply because Oregon went into the heart of SEC country, Mobile, Alabama, and landed a 5-star defensive line edge prospect that SEC and the best of the ACC programs, they never stopped recruiting this guy. They tried like heck to get him on campus multiple times. He did, and he's still stuck with Oregon. To go into SEC country and not just land a Brandon Dorlus, who was a 4-star defensive lineman a while ago and is now in the NFL and was a highly productive player and had his options at Oregon before he chose Oregon. But to go in and land maybe the region's best player at that position, or second or third best player in SEC country, that the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Tennessees, the LSUs, the Auburns, the Florida States, the Miamis, they're all going after this guy. And it would make easy, simple sense to stay home and be close to home. He chose Oregon. He chose to go across the country. That is a monumental get, I think, from on the field perspective, but also a shot across the bow of where this program has elevated itself to be able to do that, to go into that area and land that high caliber of a guy is really impressive.
I mean, how about this? Back-to-back years landing the top player in the state of Alabama. Whoever thought that was a possibility for a school like Oregon? Back-to-back years landing a 5-star and the best player in the state of Alabama. 3 consecutive years landing either the best or the second best player in the state of Maryland. Like Emmanuel Ihanacho, who is kind of surprised he's not the best player in Maryland, because Zion Ely was one of the top players, pass rusher. He committed to Maryland, is actually ended a streak of 2 consecutive years, because Iffy and Brandon Finney were both the highest rated player in the state of Maryland the back-to-back years before it. But that's really impressive. Last year, they land the best player in the state of Texas. This year, they land, assuming the signature gets in, number 4 in Jaylen Lott. I bring those up because you're talking about 3 pipeline states that shouldn't be Oregon pipelines, that Oregon is not only getting good talent from, but the best talent from. And they're going across the country and recruiting nationally in a way that, like, I don't know, Matt, we grew up following this program. It felt improbable they'd even sniff a top 10 recruiting class when we were growing up. And it certainly felt improbable they could go into Alabama, Texas, Maryland. I'm not even getting through all the states. I mean, North Carolina with Kendra Harrison is a prospect I would love to talk about. There's a ton of top 100 prospects from across the country in this class. And just to see it be done year over year under Coach Lanning, like, guys, this is not your dad's, your uncle's, your grandpa's Oregon football. This is a totally different animal.
Yeah, and it's at a different level we've ever seen it, and it's only getting better. And I think that's probably the crazy part is the longtime Duck fan that they've grown up wishing for this. And I don't think they're even close to reaching what it could cap out at from a recruiting success standpoint, from an on-field success standpoint. I mean, obviously they need to win a national championship, and that's going to be the thing that hangs over the program the most when they talk with their competitors of we've done this, you haven't. But it's positioned as well as it's ever been, and every time, every cycle, we continue to say it's as good as it's ever been. And yet I think what's crazy and encouraging is the staff currently, Dan Lanning being the head man, is finding ways to say, okay, this is the best they've ever done it, or we've ever done it. Let's double it next year. Let's find a way to build off of it next year. The Alabama thing, I hadn't even thought of that. That is absolutely wild to me that Oregon has landed the state of Alabama's best player 2 years in a row.
Nuts.
That has doesn't make sense in my brain of someone that's grown up watching this team, has covered this team since 2009. That does not compute.
Well, and I know we've got a whole lot of other places to go, but let me just do a quick scroll of Oregon signees here. Number 1 player in Alabama, number 1 player in Nevada, that's Jet Washington, number 2 player in Maryland, number 3 player in North Carolina, number 4 player in Texas, number 4 player in California, that's Tommy Tofi, number 9 player in Texas, that's Tradarian Ball, number 10 player in the state of Florida, that's Devin Jackson. And I did want to just note with Devin Jackson here, I was thinking about this morning. There was so much focus on the guys who hadn't signed, and Devin Jackson was kind of getting overlooked because they're a bigger fish to fry. You had the Chris Henry Jr. story. You had Kendra Harrison and Jaylen Lott. Devin Jackson's the 8th highest rated prospect in this class for Oregon, and he's a top 75 recruit nationally. That just puts into perspective how deep and talented this class is, where a guy who's like the 8th best safety in the country from all the way across the nation, you go like, oh, there's like 4 or 5 guys we're talking about more than he is, when there's still, outstanding signatures to wait on. We can probably talk about superlatives and how crazy this is all podcasts, but maybe we should talk about some of our favorite prospects now and whatnot. Maybe I'll just throw it to Jackson and let him start there. I just can't say enough for where this program is at from a recruiting perspective, and to suggest that they're one signature away maybe from having the number 1 recruiting class in the country is surreal, really.
One other note I'd hit on real quick as well is, since I've joined the beat, I haven't seen any decommitments, but I believe in the summer there's about 5 or so guys that departed from this class that were like top 200 recruits. And usually when schools lose those types of guys, you got to go down to the next tier. Maybe you're talking about 3-star replacements, but this could be the number 1 class even without all those guys they lost, and they replaced them with equal or better talent in a lot of cases. And you get Braylon Hodge late in the process, who was the best available linebacker at the time, outside of getting a flip. That was the best case scenario in a time where there's not a lot of scenarios left. So it's been impressive to see how they've been able to overcome some of the guys that left and not skip a beat at all.
I'm going to throw it right back at you, Jackson, because I think we should start talking favorite 26s. But that reminds Matt, remember we did a podcast in the summer about like what's wrong with Oregon recruiting?
I told everyone like, hey, calm down. Like there's plenty of time still left to go.
Patience, grasshoppers, patience.
Oh, that was a fun time. It's clearly bad. They've got to really reshape the program and figure things out.
It's broken. The program is broken. All right. Some favorite 2026 guys. I don't care who starts, but I figured we should hit some guys that we really enjoy watching the tape or who we think are going to be immediate contributors, because we've hit on some of the names, and mostly we've hit on guys who haven't signed, but there's about 20 guys who have, and a lot of them are really, really exciting players. I'll let you start, Jackson, since this is your animal here.
Yeah, I just published the Kendra Harrison capsule, and that was the one I was looking forward to hitting the most over the last 24 hours or so. Just a ridiculous film. The thing I love about Kendra Harrison is that, these unusual size players are always really intriguing, but to see someone like that who also has a mean streak that will put that size to use to where he doesn't care, he doesn't feel bad for you if you're 6 inches smaller than him. He's going to push you all the way into the bleachers. I mean, it's wild. And our scouting report on 24/7 Sports starts with modern day giant. It's just that's
It's a
and that's
good
a
bit of
fair
writing.
description of this guy. He's 6'7", 250. Not even getting into the basketball stuff. It's just, I think, never, not that Oregon ever plays down the competition, but when they play lesser competition, you could probably get this guy 2 or 3 scores in these types of games when the Montana States of the world come in and have absolutely no answer for how to defend this guy. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see him. I think he's going to be able to come in right away and make some sort of impact. It's been neat to see how the tight ends have taken such a role here the last couple of weeks, and thinking about plugging him in there. Definitely my favorite of the class. I mean, there's a lot to pick from, but man, this guy's just something else.
Yeah, he is the size of a Darnell Washington, the Georgia kid from a while ago, but with the athleticism of a hooper. And he looks. I remember Matt when he was up here for Junior Day last year. He just looks like an NBA player. Like just the way he moves and just what he looks like physically, he looks like a basketball player. And then you watch him play football, and he still kind of looks like a basketball player, but he plays like an elite football player. Like I was watching some highlights yesterday of him hurdling guys at 6'7", and I like that. You're like, oh, he's tall. That's probably easier. I don't know if it is because he takes him a little bit. It's harder for him to get off the ground quickly, and guys are going to be shooting. I know they have a higher target to hit to take him out, but it's really like I don't know how you mentioned Jackson. Like, how does Montana State defend him? I'm curious to see how actually good teams at this level defend him because he is freaky. It's really hard to pick. I think I'll just say Jet Washington and be kind of a pick like the top guy in the class, but I'm really fascinated by what he's going to be here. I know Dan said the options were limitless yesterday when I asked him about Jet. 6'5", 205, but anything from a finesse player. Like some of the hardest hits I've seen all cycle are from a guy who's kind of leanly built. And that's why I'm fascinated by, because Dan said like maybe they could use him a little bit like they've used Dylan Thieneman at Oregon this year in terms of just moving him around a little bit. He's in the box. He's playing deep sometimes, take advantage of kind of that versatile skill set. I'm in on that. I'm also curious if like, could you pack 30 pounds on him and have him be playing linebacker in a similar role, but a much better player than, and the only reason I bring it up is I just watched Oregon play USC, but Eric Gentry at USC, who's like a 6'6", 225-pound, 230-pound linebacker. I'm just curious if that's something that makes sense, or maybe when you've got a kid with this sort of athleticism and the ability to play deep, you just take advantage of it, and it's a no-brainer. But he's Kobe Bryant's nephew, but he doesn't play like a basketball player. I guess that's the first two guys we're bringing up here are hoopers who are incredibly physical and just play the game with the tenacity that stands out. So I think this is a guy who could immediately have an impact depending on what Dylan does. And even if Dylan does come back, like I wouldn't be surprised if they find a role to get him on the field quite a bit, maybe not as a starter, but as a guy that's involved in several base packages in some capacity.
Yeah, Washington was going to be one of my guys, and Eric, I had the same thinking. And I wrote about it on a piece. Look, I'm going to pub something I just published on the site. 4,500 words or more on this class, background information, a bunch of nuggets and whatnot. And one of the things I talked about on it was Jet Washington. I had that same thought, Eric. He's at 205 right now. Can you get him to 220? Can you get him to 230 and keep the athleticism? That's NFL linebacker size with DB abilities and mobility. That's a scary thought to see play out. I don't know if it's 100% the same player, but like my first reaction of when you see these big safeties is Taylor Mays of what he did at USC. Can Jet Washington kind of transform himself into that type of a guy? Really fun to watch play out. So I'm with you there.
Well, and just one thing on that thought is if he's could be a Taylor Mays, could he put on 30 pounds and just still play safety and be even more intimidating, right? Like, I don't know.
I'm going to go Tre'Davious Ball. We've seen him at Saturday Night Live the last couple of years when they had it. I am as excited for him as a running back, and you look at the stuff that he's done there, 248 and 3 rushing touchdowns in a game this season, 4 games with over 100 yards rushing as a senior this year in a really difficult state of Texas that produces elite talent everywhere. But it's the receiving. I mean, he easily could have just said, I want to be a receiver. I'm going to be recruited as a receiver, and probably would have been a top 100, top 150 caliber player as a receiver instead of a running back. 183 yards and receiving yards and 2 touchdowns in a game. He had 140 yards in a 2024 season opener from a receiving perspective. He closed his junior year with 3 straight 100-yard receiving games. This is a guy that's – we use the term positionless basketball all the time. We're maybe transitioning to that in football now. Think about Kenyon Sadiq flexing between receiver and tight end. Thinking about Oregon using De'Aaron Hill and Noah Whittington this year kind of in the slot and then putting him at receiver and putting him at running back and not really kind of taking them off the field at all. We saw it with Decorium Moore come in as a receiver, and all of a sudden he's lining up in the backfield. And Oregon is doing this because if you don't have to substitute, you can go tempo and you can get your opponent caught in a difficult matchup because of who they have on the field. Tre'Davious Ball is going to be another one of those guys that can do that. He is a dynamic receiver. He's a dynamic running back. I don't know if he's going to play as a true freshman next year, but if he does, it's because of his two-way ability to be all over the place on offense.
I think you're going to see a 3-headed young group there with the 2 true freshmen who will be sophomores next year in Davison and Hill and Ball. And I don't know what the hierarchy will be, but I think you're going to have a lot of fun using those guys. And the explosiveness that you could get out of a 21 personnel package where I know you're not going to have the elite blocker if it's both Hill and Ball on the field together, but just all the type of creative plays, whoever is calling plays next year for Oregon, like all the just fun things you can do out of this offense in those kind of sets where they have multiple of them on the field is going to be scintillating to watch. And I know I'm not saying it's a sure thing he plays, Matt, and sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, but I think I'm currently living in the world of Oregon just basically took its 2025 class and like the 6 or 7 most intriguing players from that class all played massive roles on this team. This class has as much, if not more, top 100 depth than the 2025 class. And I'm anticipating all 3 of the guys we just talked about having roles on next year's team. And then there being opportunities for maybe some of these offensive linemen. Like, would you guys be surprised if either, Emmanuel Ihanacho or Tommy Tofi are starting at some point next year or playing at some point next year? I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be surprised if Jaylen Lott, if they get Chris Henry, if like those guys are involved. And on defense, like who's stopping Anthony Jones necessarily from being? I'm not saying all of them will play. That's just not realistic. But this team is signing prospects at such a level right now that it feels not irrational to say, no, I think like 6 or 7 of these guys are going to be contributors next year. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. And the 3 guys we just talked about, to me, all have direct paths to doing so with, Harrison in particular at tight end. Sadiq's gone. I think we're all huge Jamari Johnson fans, but I bet you they'll run a lot of 2 tight end personnel next year, and he needs somebody else out there with him. I think Kendra Harrison fits the bill better than just about anybody else. We'll see what Thieneman does, but I think you can find ways to play Jet Washington. And then, like I said, I think Ball can be, even if he's your number 3 running back, that could be a guy who runs for 400 or 500 yards like D.R. Hill did this year. a lot of reasons to be really excited. And I think we just highlighted 3 guys, and we could easily highlight for like 12 more if we wanted to, because there's just so many fun players. Should we do because we all picked top 50-ish recruits. Should we pick somebody outside that range that stands out? Is that worth doing?
Well, that's funny because we always do like a who's your sleeper, who's your diamond in the rough type guy. And by true definition, sleeper, our options are 5 guys.
Yeah, pretty limited.
I think that speaks to just how good Oregon's class is, how deep it is, how talented it is. And maybe I'll go first. It is one of those 5 guys for me, but I was going to say him regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Dutch Horsick, a edge guy from St. John Bosco. There's certain schools, there's certain leagues across the country where it just translates to the next level. And St. John Bosco is one of the most talented, deepest high school programs in the country. Oregon's got a couple guys on it, Mateo Uyungale being the most prominent one right now. They play a national schedule. They travel to the East Coast and then come back and play an elite team on the West Coast. They'll play Bishop Gorman. They are not afraid to play anybody in anywhere in the country. And then they play their league games in the Trinity League, which has Mater Dei High School in it, which is another top 5, top 10 program. And the other schools in the Trinity League are really good and produce almost all of the SoCal area Power 4 type players. And then a bunch of group of 5 guys. And for Dutch Horsick to play in that league and to be considered by high school coaches in that league one of the best players, regardless of position, regardless of class, the production that he puts up, I'm not going to be surprised if this is a guy that shows up and maybe he redshirts, maybe he finds a way on special teams as a true freshman. But every year he maybe just takes one more step. He just gets a little bit better. He gets a little bit better. And by the time he leaves Oregon, he's been a dude. He's a regular contributor. He plays in maybe the toughest, most competitive league in the country from a high school standpoint on one of the best teams in the country and is one of their best players. And so while you look at him and think he's a 3-star guy, maybe he doesn't have the measurables to be a 5-star or a 4-star. His production, though, is of that type of player. So I really like him long-term at Oregon.
I think he had 11.5 sacks as a sophomore at St. John Bosco. That's pretty good work. I'm going to cheat slightly and pick a 4-star. Sorry.
I don't think that's cheating because you don't have very many options.
I don't have a lot of options. But I'm taking one of the few outside of the top 247, if that makes me cheat less, I guess. Tristan Phillips. I'm really intrigued to watch. It was one of my favorite highlight reels to watch. Matt, I knew you uncovered it, and I didn't realize this. Jackson may already have known, but 6 sacks in a CIF championship game, like that's just really, really good work. And you're a linebacker too, so like he's not rushing the passer like every down conceivably. Dan compared him to Bryce Betcher from a mentality perspective. I think we shared this on the podcast, Matt, but didn't you have kind of a funny back and forth with him where his competitiveness or maybe hate for another program kind of came through? You can share it I can't remember if we've talked or not about it.
Yeah, when he committed, I asked him, like, is there anything else that like you want to like share about your story or your time at Oregon when you committed, or just like what am I missing? Am I forgetting anything that you want to have included? And I'm paraphrasing, but it was, yeah, you basically can say, beep the Huskies. I'm Oregon all the way. Like, and this was a guy that was, he wasn't even here for the Washington game when it happened. So like he's fully entrenched in the Oregon versus Washington rivalry. Is all about it. And I never really like had it click, but yeah, Dan Lanning comparing him to Bryce Betcher fits like 100% perfect.
That was the person. So that was the first thing I thought of when he said that. I said, well, yeah, he did say F the Huskies to Matt in an interview, and that tells you he probably is a lot like Bryce Betcher. So, yeah, I don't know how much he's playing right away because freshman linebackers have had a harder time, and he's a lowly 4-star prospect here, not even a top 247, so super diamond in the rough. But I think this is a guy whose name you're going to hear in a couple of years, and you're going to be excited to watch.
Would you guys mind if I touched on a couple of quick ones?
No, go for it. It's your turn.
All right. Well, if I got to pick just one from that bottom group, I think Chloe Kelly is an interesting one just because his path is so similar to Pancho and they're so well connected. He grew up with them. He comes on the visit and they're hanging out together and they showing him the ropes. And Chloe's big enough. He's really humble. It probably got the mentality and the attitude that reflects where he is in the pecking order in this class. So, he's got a good head on his shoulders. I think it's going to be a guy that might be able to follow in those footsteps. And I think from a pure rating perspective, if you're looking for diamond in the rough, Hudson Lewis feels like a guy where if he doesn't pan out, if he gets buried and he transfers somewhere else and it's no sweat off the Ducks, but with his speed and athleticism, he could very well become a weapon. Maybe he's not playing every down the road, but they could definitely find a role for him with what he's got to work with. Kind of in that mid-range tier, some of the guys that have just been a ton of fun to watch on film all season. Xavier Larice is ridiculous. I'm so happy he got his 4th star, or else he would have been my pick a couple of weeks ago on the same discussion. Quarterback, running back, safety, punter, returner, just does it all. And I'm so excited. I just think he's a guy that once the lights are on, he's going to do things that don't necessarily reflect on just basic drills and that kind of stuff. This guy's a gamer. And I think Bryson Beaver is worthy of some discussion because there's probably a collection of throws that guys like Dante Moore can make that he can't quite yet. And, if I was picking whatever quarterback I wanted in this class, there'd probably be a few more ahead of him. But I mean, he can make most of the throws, and I think he's sneaky athletic. I think if you put a machine around him, he can do most of the stuff you need him to do to keep you afloat. And I think his athleticism and his mobility is just a little bit something extra that, like most guys his age, it might crumble with some pressure and he might be able to make something happen. So I'm not sure what his ceiling looks like or if he gets there or how long it takes, but it does feel like his floor is pretty high if you had to throw him out there.
I got another one. I'm happy you mentioned Beaver because he's going to get lost in the shuffle. He's by definition, late bloomer. He exploded in the summer before his senior year. But you watch his intangibles, and with a year of development or 2 years of development, he could turn into something pretty good. Tony Cumberland is another guy that I think deserves a shout out. I can't remember if he was a 5-star or was really close to being one as like a freshman, sophomore.
When he committed, Matt, I've just got it pulled up. Yeah, he was a 5-star when he committed in 2023.
And you look at his ranking history, and he was trending down almost every update for like 2 or 3 years almost. And it just wasn't translating on the field. It looked like a guy that maybe just looked really good as a younger guy and kind of plateaued a little bit. And his senior season at Willamette High School, he transferred ahead of his junior year to Eugene from Arizona, enrolled at Willamette High School, and is a guy that he took another step from his junior year when he was kind of like a bottom top 247 guy to getting himself back into the top 100. And I think that takes a lot of, that's something you got to acknowledge. It's something you got to praise a little bit because some guys just kind of assume they've made it. They dip and they don't recover. He did. He made it back into the top 100. And as a senior, he exploded and had 102 tackles, 26 tackles for loss, 14 sacks. And he's been at Oregon a lot. I think Dan Lanning said that he was here for like installs of stuff in the spring and in the summer. because he lived in town. He could drive over. So, like, he's been around the program essentially as almost a quasi player. Can't participate, but he can watch off to the side. And he's been watching Oregon and their defense and learning for the last year and a half, 2 years. And that's going to pay off down the road whenever he rolls, which I would assume is going to be here in the next couple weeks to a couple months.
Yeah. One last thought on that, and I've heard this. I can't say I've done the deep dive into Willamette, but my understanding is they're running a similar offense and a similar defense to Oregon that should kind of expedite the process here of, like, I know it's not totally fair. I'm not saying this is exactly what's happening, but moving up to Eugene and playing at Willamette, it was almost kind of like joining the Oregon junior varsity team for a couple of years just to get yourself ready. And I'm not saying that's exactly what it is by any means, but he's somebody who I think should have a bit more of a head start, maybe, in terms of, like, he'll get here and he should have a good idea on the system. He's been around the facilities more than everybody else. He'll have a comfort level with his coaches, although sounds like probably he'll have a new defensive coordinator and maybe there's other roster turnover from a coaching perspective on that side of the ball, depending on what happens with Tosh filling his staff out. But regardless, I think that's a good name to bring up, Matt, because he gets overlooked a little bit. Ends up being the 88th best player in the country, one of the top defensive linemen in the country, been committed to Oregon forever. And he's been basically in like the minor league system for Oregon for a couple of years, up here in Eugene. And I think that's something that I'm not sure how often we'll see that going forward. But I also think it's a thing that could really benefit this particular player and just getting him ready to play right away. And given that Oregon maybe has some NFL decisions on its interior defensive line, I'm not going to say he's going to be a big contributor right away, but could there be a path to him finding a role, maybe a smaller role, a la Nasir Wyatt, totally different players, but just somebody who they like enough, he's prepared enough, and he's ready to come in and make some kind of an impact right away in his Oregon career. Not saying it's going to happen, but just it's definitely not impossible.
All right, what comes next? Let's end the show here. Chris Henry, Jaylen Lott, that's all that we're waiting on. Those are the two guys you obviously take in a heartbeat. Jaylen Lott's already committed. We're just waiting for a signature to get in, processed, compliance approved. Chris Henry, Oregon staff trying to make the flip, see if that can happen. Do we anticipate, do they need to go after somebody else for the high school ranks or the JUCO ranks for the February signing period? Because that still is a thing. There will be another signing period in February. Or is this it? Like, do we anticipate anyone else, any need from a high school perspective? Or do we see Oregon shift its focus after Lott and Henry to portal?
Go ahead, Jackson.
I think, excuse me, probably not as far as high school goes. I think this, once the dust settles here, if there's someone that was on their board that's still available, you circle back regardless of position. You're probably best available at this stage if you're talking high school. And you might get someone that enrolls early and decides to hit the portal. It's a short window, but we've seen it happen with some.
It happened at Oregon last year.
Yep.
JKS.
So there might be, a surprise prospect available when you get there. But I think for the most part, the February signing period will be more of a celebration for what they get in the portal and in the junior college ranks. I think probably Oregon has the luxury where they might not have to dip in the junior college too much, but I think a lot of schools are just going to look at those two pools of prospects about equal. Older guys, transfers, junior college, who's the best we can get and get them in here, and we'll announce them all on the first Wednesday in February.
I guess if you're just assessing position groups of need, there aren't. I think they've checked boxes from my perspective. Maybe getting another offensive lineman would make sense, considering there's going to be a lot leaving, and they've got 3 really good ones, but maybe going and finding a fourth. A second tight end was something they looked at early on in this process. I know, obviously you love Kendra Harrison, but Sadiq will be gone. You have a limited number of guys with experience there. Maybe it's worth trying to find somebody there. Defensively, you can always probably take another defensive lineman, but I don't know if that's a big need. And they've hit the secondary so hard. I think that would have been an area to bring up had they not signed 2 players that hadn't been committed on signing day. So I don't think there's a ton left on the bone. And I would say it's like there's some players that were committed to LSU who aren't signing, and there's going to be other schools like that are going through coaching changes. I'd say monitor that a little bit, but I don't know if there's a huge need anywhere. And even though it's a relatively small class, it's going to finish at 21 or 22 signees. I don't know if you really need to go out there and press the issue very much, frankly, in February.
I'm with you. I think they shift to portal, and Dan Lanning's comments about they're taking the quality over quantity at the high school and JUCO level for this signing class is a sign that they probably spent some good money, probably spent a lot of money on this recruiting class from an NIL perspective.
I think you'd be right, Matt. I think it's probably
But you also shake the pillows. You get the sock out with the money hanging, with the money stuck in there, and
Matt, you
I still got a lot left.
And hate to follow up, Matt. Are you putting coins in your socks?
I put some cash in some socks. Do you not do that?
No, I've never done it.
I have an emergency fund somewhere in the house.
Oh boy. Good to know. All right.
You get all your money though, and you pool it together. They still have a lot, and this is where it's going to get spent. They're going to go to the portal, and I would anticipate Oregon being a highly aggressive, very laser focused on what they want, who they want, and they will fill the needs that come after the portal opens, departures happen, guys go pro. Because that's going to be the topic here. Does Kenyon Sadiq go pro? Does Dante Moore go pro? Does Dylan Thieneman go pro? Mateo Uyunglele go pro? Amari Washington go pro? That's a long list. And to keep all of them here is going to cost a lot of money. It's probably not going to happen. Some of them will go, probably more than likely. I will be a little shocked if all these big names say, we're coming back, we're going to run it one more year. It's hard to turn down the millions that come with being a first-round pick, which many of those guys are projected to be. So they're going to have those holes opened up. That's where they're going to spend the money. They're going to go to the portal, and they're going to find the super talented offensive tackle, or they're going to find the super talented tight end, or they're going to add a dynamic receiver. That's where it's going to go. And they're going to probably be very poignant about who they go after and how aggressive it is, and that's where the focus goes in my eyes.
Yeah, and I'm guessing it's going to be the same as the prep recruiting, quality over quantity. I think once again you'll see a class in the 8 to 12 range from a portal perspective, and they'll just, like you said, Matt, they'll focus in on, hey, we need to replace this position, we need an immediate contributor. We'll go find one of the top guys. They'll be selective. And 2026, I think we're going to be treated to a really fun 2025 postseason run. If certain things fall certain ways, 2026 could be really special. And certainly about 24 guys that are going to sign in this 26 class are going to have something to say about that and some level be involved in what I think is going to be an awesome season next year once again.
All right, that's it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll be back. Probably the next time you hear from us will be either Sunday night or Monday morning, going over the college football playoffs and where the Oregon Ducks have landed going into the first round of that exciting playoff run. But until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.